Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I am John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic for you today. Let's do it. What is one of the most bone chilling things that you've read online that claims to be true? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. True story time. I was about 4 or 5 years old, and my parents had just separated. My mom was living in a two-bedroom apartment. I had my own room, but I liked sleeping in her bed whenever I was staying with her. Our two bedrooms were at the end of the hallway, directly across from each other. Our apartment was on the first floor, and I remember that it was in the middle of the summer, and my mom had a window open in her room that was directly behind the bed above the headboard. Anyways, I woke up in the middle of the night and remember sitting up and seeing that our cat was sitting in the doorframe of my mom's room. Her door was open, and you could partially see into the bedroom. It was strange because our cat has a huge snuggler and was typically always in bed with us. As I was watching him, he walked into my bedroom and meowed. I turned to face my mom and wake her up. In the 3 or 4 seconds it took her to wake up and ask me what was wrong, we both looked back up in the doorframe, and there was a man standing by my open door, making his way out of my bedroom. I still don't know how she managed to do it so quickly, but my mother proceeded to pick me up and literally throw me out the screen window. Again, we were on the first floor, and it was maybe a 3-foot drop to the ground. She quickly followed, and we were able to start screaming for help, and someone called 911. The police came, but didn't see any signs of forced entry, only that our front door was unlocked, which led them to believe the man must have exited that way. But the strange thing was, my mom swore up and down that she'd locked the door that night with the deadbolt and chain lock. About a week later, she was cleaning the kitchen and opened up our water heater closet and found a notebook with names and drawings, as well as a pair of gloves and some gum wrappers. The man had been in our house and hid until we were asleep. It was the story about an ex-Marine who was driving on the road at night, and he sees a car in the middle of the road with two people lying on the ground. He has this gut feeling that something is wrong, and he decides to act on it by driving past the car and the two people. While he's driving, he takes a look at his rearview mirror to see two people lying on the road stand up with 10 other people coming out of the bushes. I didn't know that assholes like that existed. I don't remember what the link was, but it was a forum of people with infectious diseases coordinating to send vials of blood to people with other infectious diseases. They would take low doses of antibiotics to weaken the effect of the antibiotics and strengthen the strain of diseases. I remember thinking that this was the kind of stuff that the CDC would get involved in immediately. It was basically bioterrorism. For me, it's the guy who was camping out in the deep forests of Canada or something and thought he was being watched by something. He didn't think much more of it before he got home and found a picture of himself sleeping in the camera. I mean, just on its face, that's creepy, but this is also pretty easy to manipulate, or just have somebody, a friend, take a picture of you while you're sleeping, tell the story, it gets posts. But if it's real, creepy as hell. I've read about serial killers quite a lot. I just find the subject fascinating and never really get caught up on or affected by grisly details. Sure, I feel sad for the victims and their loved ones, but the gore and depravity never really bothers me. Dahmer, Chikatilo, Gain, Fish, read all about them in detail and was perfectly fine. However, there was one guy whose deeds really did shit me up. Dean Corll. He was America's most prolific serial killer before Ted Bundy took the dubious distinction, so I thought it strange that I'd never heard of him before. The short of it is that he was a pretty normal guy in his younger years, a bit of a repressed homosexuality, but nothing about him could have hinted at what he was capable of. He basically groomed and paid two boys to supply him with their friends, and when they ran out, other kids in several neighborhoods he lived over the years. He would tie these kids, all boys, to his torture board, where he would abuse or mutilate and ultimately kill them. Then he would dispose of the bodies in several locations, including a boathouse. These activities went on for a number of years, and he was very careful and methodical about the whole thing. I don't think it was ever suspected by authorities that a large number of missing boys were connected. The thing that really shook me up is how the two boys he recruited were so callous and were perfectly fine in sending boys of their own age and social group or school to their deaths for cash, and were quite happy to aid Coral in torturing the victims and disposing of the bodies. Eventually, one of the boys brought a girl to his friend. Coral, angry and annoyed and scared the girl might report him, set about killing the girl. But the boy must have liked her or something, because he ended up shooting and killing Coral to protect her. I think the fact he was never captured or faced punishment for his crimes makes him much creepier than other serial killers. He was never seen on the stand or in a jumpsuit in jail, so he seems less human for it. He was never analyzed by psychologists and found to be a madman or deeply disturbed. There's just no logic or reason behind his crimes other than his own personal gratification. He just emblazoned in my mind as some kind of heinous boogeyman above and beyond the reach of man's police and justice system. That's why he shit me up more than any other serial killer I've read about before. Can't remember the article or where on the web it was, but it was a lot more detailed than the Wikipedia article and included Polaroid pictures of victims, some still unidentified, strapped to his torture board, awaiting their horrific, untimely ends, not for the faint of heart. I'll be honest, I've never heard the name before, but I'm going to read up about him now, so thank you for sharing. I mean, terrible, but thank you for sharing. Every goddamn time a scientific article announces that a meteor will be passing crazy close to Earth, and always has the caveat of astronomers have estimated the chance of impact at 1 in 100,000. But for the remaining 2/3 of this article, we will explain how it will vaporize our atmosphere and oral organic life. And then, to be complete assholes, it's not a matter of if, but when. God damn it, science article. I'm already in enough trouble with the landlord for digging spontaneous fallout shelters in the lawn. An ex-boyfriend of mine was an Iraqi Kurd. He told me a crazy story from camping in the woods in northern Iraq. He and a few friends were skipping school the day before the weekend, Thursday in the Middle East. They had plans to go right after school, thus their parents thought they were at school. So they left their iPhones at home so their parents can't see where they are. The rumors in the area outside is that the woods outside Erbil, the people who were gassed by Saddam were banished, the ones that lived, with their birth defects. Essentially, hills have eyes, human corpses, stripped of flesh, have been found in cabins, and authorities refuse to enter those woods, etc., etc. So, back to my ex. They arrive at the woods and park their car on the road at the bottom of the hill. They set camp and make a fire, and begin like teenage boys to scare the shit out of each other, and recall the stories about these banished, for lack of a better word, mutants. As night falls, they begin to hear whispering in the trees and twigs snapping. They retreat to the tent and let the fire die alone outside of fear. As the fire dies, they hear voices getting closer and start to panic, trying to keep quiet. There is more than a dozen mutants outside the tent. They hear all of their stuff being rummaged through, and they lay petrified in the tent, just looking at each other. One of the mutants asks if they should see who's in the tent, to which another replied, "Leave them." Unable to call for help, they wait till dawn breaks, only to find their entire camp destroyed with no money missing, no electronics missing, just food, cooking pots, and clothing missing. Trying to gather what had happened, a lone woman walks down the hill toward them. She has no fingers and wrapped in fabric shreds. At this point, they bolt barefoot down the hill, trying to reach the car. When my ex reaches the bottom near a stream, he stops to cross it, and squatting in the river taking a piss is a young girl with no hair, no nose, and a missing eye, just staring at him. She starts to scream as loud as she can. Worried she'll alert the others, he keeps running. When he gets to the car, his friends are waiting for him, but the car had been raided already, and they had left the keys at the camp. Needless to say, they walked till they hitched a ride. A few months later, an Austrian film crew fled the forest in the same manner after filming a documentary. However, they had found reportedly a cabin full of fillet human carcasses in police and military uniforms. If anyone remembers this story, help me out. I know I'm messing up some parts, and I want to reread what actually happened. About 2 years ago, I read about a man who posted an ad on Craigslist claiming to own a legit production company, and he was casting for an indie horror film. I guess some actors replied and showed up for the casting. This guy was a total nut, but they assumed he was just odd and agreed to do the film because they wanted new work for their acting reels. After a few days of working with him, everyone quits because he starts to come off as a little disturbed. He then proceeds to post a personal ad on Craigslist, posing as a woman looking for a fling. He exchanges some emails with a young guy from the area, and he tells her he'll pick her up for coffee. The guy parks outside of this woman's house, texts her, and says, "Hey, I'm outside whenever you're ready," or something like that. She replies, says she can come in while she gets ready, but to enter through the garage door, which was already open. The guy goes into the garage, and the door immediately starts closing behind him. Someone knocks him out. He wakes up strapped to a table in a Dexter-type setting with a camera on him. I think there were knives and tools on a table beside him. He somehow escaped after a few hours. Could have been days, I forget, but waited to go to the police because he was embarrassed. Once the police start questioning the original director dude, they find out he has a history of mental illness. They take a journal from his room that was filled with diary entries of how he would kill people, one being a man strapped to a table in his garage, but claimed they were just movie ideas. If I'm not mistaken, they later found a dead girl in his neighbor's trash can, who was believed to have met him on Craigslist after he posted another casting ad. I need to know if he ever got convicted. There was a Dateline special about him too. TLDR. Man claims to be movie director on Craigslist looking to cast actors. One girl who replied is found in a trash can. A man who replied to a different post by the same director was knocked out and strapped to a table in his garage. Police found a journal with his movie ideas, one of which included a man being strapped to a table and murdered while it was filmed. Edit. Okay, so after reading the Wikipedia page for Mark Twitchell, it turns out he actually used plentyoffish.com, a legit dating website. First guy he tried to kill escaped. The second victim was reported missing after his friends and family received a weird email about him going to Costa Rica with a woman he just met, and his boss received a resignation. He was then found dismembered, and Twitchell was arrested. He was also convicted and sentenced 25 to life. Thanks for the help. I think Craigslist got rid of their personal ads or things like that because there was a bunch of murders at different parts of the country. I'm pretty sure my area, the Long Island serial killer, did a lot of his stalking for sex workers on Craigslist. I think I'm right. What do you guys think? This reminds me of a situation that happened to me. I was serving in the U.S. Army and stationed in Fort Polk, Louisiana. If you've ever been there or known someone in the U.S. Army who has, then you'd know this place is a shithole. The whole region is nothing but dirt roads, shitty towns, angry rednecks, and wilderness. Luckily, I grew up in Dallas, Texas. I was able to drive home every other weekend to see friends and family. Back then, my eyesight was perfect, and I actually preferred doing long drives at night when the traffic was light, and I could actually make out the headlights of police cars in the distance, since the police always drove Ford Crown Victorias back then. It was about a 5-hour drive, and about 3 hours of it was back roads that went through a lot of temperate forest and swamps. There were multiple ways to go, but this way allowed me to go the fastest with the fewest stops. I was driving through the dark, not a single light anywhere other than the stars, and they weren't too bright. Then suddenly, I see a person on a bicycle in the distance. I remember he was wearing a white t-shirt and jeans. The white shirt reflected my headlights enough that I was able to see him within enough time to slow down and pull to the left more to give him some space. I passed him at about 300 miles per hour and then sped back up to 55 miles per hour and kept going. About 15 minutes later, I see another bicycle in the distance, so I slow down again. As I'm coming up on this one, I see that it's another person in a white shirt and jeans. I never paid too much attention to the first one, so I couldn't say whether or not it was the same guy on the same bike, but I obviously assumed it was a strange coincidence. I laughed it off and kept going. I did get a good look at the guy. Then I noted that the bike was dark blue, no reflectors, at least on the rear, and he had on his own thick brown hair and white sneakers. I kept going, and about 10 minutes later, I almost have a heart attack when I see another white shirt dancing in the distance, reflecting my headlights. I slow down to about 25 miles per hour as I come up on him. As I come closer and see it's another person on another bicycle, I pay close attention. As I pass him going slow enough to probably creep him out, I stare out the side window at him. He stares right back at me. Same guy, same bike, same clothes, same everything. This one guy managed to somehow bike his way through a wormhole or something and ended up on 10 minutes ahead of me on the roadway 3 times at 10 p.m. The way he looked at me wasn't ominous or creepy. He looked at me like I was freaking him out, just as much as he was freaking me out. That made it creepier for me, because something that impossible should be creepy to me, not him. It's like we came from different dimensions and just happened to meet on the same stretch of wilderness road where the physics of our two worlds cannot coincide. I speed the hell up and drive out of there as fast as I can. I wasn't tired before or after this, but I assumed I needed some coffee or something. A few minutes later, I came across the only 24-hour gas station on the road until you reach the Shreveport region. I quickly pull in and go inside. I grab a bottle of water and some coffee first, then go looking for something to munch on. I'm creeped out and just can't stop thinking about the guy on the bike. I didn't realize how long I spent just standing in the snack aisle, thinking and not purchasing anything. Then I see him, the same guy, on the same bike. He is riding past where I parked the car. He pulls his bike up to the side of the building and comes inside. As soon as he enters, he sees me, and we catch each other's eyes. He has a weird look on his face, and I'm sure I did too. We are both visibly uncomfortable. Now that I get a better look at him, I see the whole white t-shirt says something about a softball team on it, and a big number 05 over the breast pocket. He goes over to the cashier and they begin chatting. I can kind of tell he asked about me. The cashier probably told him it was strange that I was standing around not buying anything. I would have gone up to the counter to pay and effing leave, but he was standing there too. I was feeling way too creeped out and awkward to do anything. I would have put the stuff back and left out the front door, but I already poured the coffee and was sipping on it. It was one of the uncomfortable moments of my life. I felt like, was in the last or least interesting episode of The Twilight Zone ever. I just wanted to leave, but I also wanted to know who the F this guy was, and how he teleported to be ahead of me before. Finally, the guy leaves the counter and goes to the bathroom. I take this as my cue to leave, so I run up to the counter and the cashier scans my items. He asks how my night is going while giving me a weird look. I tell him it's okay, because I don't want to make this last longer than it needs to, and I thought he might think I was crazy if I asked how his buddies control wormholes. I pay and walk to my car. As I walk past his bike, I'm looking at it and studying it. Half of me is expecting there to be a time travel device attached to it, and the other half just wants to leave. I get in the car and lock the doors. I set the drinks in the cup holders and put the snacks in the passenger seat. Start the engine and put it in reverse. Look in the rearview mirror, and then I almost effing died. In my rearview mirror is the guy. He's riding his bike from the road, passing the back of my car, and goes to the front of the shop. He props his bike up against the wall next to the other bike. They're identical bikes. Part of me is wondering what the F is happening, and part of me wants to know what is going to happen when his past self comes out of the bathroom and sees his future self. He is now inside chatting with the cashier, and the cashier is clearly telling him how creepy I am. Just like before, they're both chatting about me being the creepy one, and yet they're the creepy ones. From time to time, it comes up in conversation, my beliefs in the paranormal. I've narrowed it down to a very simple explanation. It's like looking for your car keys or phone or whatever item you use frequently every day. We've all had that time when we looked for this item only to find it in the most obvious place, a place so obvious that upon review, we realize our eyes passed over it multiple times, yet our minds simply did not accept that the item was there, did not comprehend what was right in front of them. Think for a moment of what could happen around you right now that you simply do not notice because you cannot or will not process the information.